MetraAV Tech Tips. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And it's Groundhog Day. Hello, welcome to MetraAV Tech Tips. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And it's Groundhog Day. Enough of that one.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on. We had it all planned out. We were going to do like this whole whole production and everything, and it was going to be all everything.
The whole day fell apart.
No, yeah, it completely fell apart. So, anyways, but moving on from there.
So what is today's topic on Groundhog Day, Adam?
Well, it's actually a topic that we've discussed before, and which is rather fitting for Groundhog Day purposes, but it's, whatever. But beside that...
Chocolate cake?
Yeah, of course. Beside that point, everyone, as always, thank you for checking out our video today. If you have any questions about whatever it is that we're talking about, please leave it over in the chat section on the side. And again, I believe on
underneath?
Facebook, I think it's below. So leave us any comments or questions about whatever it is that we're talking about today in those areas there. Or if you are watching after the fact and this is a recording for you, leave it down in the comment sections because we do keep track of those and we do try to respond to those as quick as possible. Plus, if you have any ideas for future shows, leave it down in the comments. Let us know what ideas you want to hear us talk about, or if you have an idea yourself, give us the idea. We'd love to hear from you on that.
We're always looking for suggestion because you think it'd be easy to come up with titles.
It's a little tougher than you think. It's a little bit tougher. But on that anyways, of course, like, share, subscribe, hit that little bell notification to let you know whenever we do go live, which of course Brent is every
Wednesday at 3 p.m. and every Friday at
3 p.m. as well. And that's Eastern time, of course, because we're here in the correct time zone.
If you're in Hawaii, it's actually at 10 a.m.
Is it really that far away?
Yeah, 5 hours.
Oh, okay. Well, what do you know? Very cool. Okay, so
their day's just starting.
Yes, it is.
Lucky them.
Yeah, that's very true. So, with that said, today's topic is specifically about this thing here. Are you configuring your network correctly? Now, specifically, this came about with Spyclops cameras and for surveillance purposes. However, I wanted to kind of use that as an excuse to talk about networking because I like networking. I think it's fun. It's one of those things that
I like watching you do networking.
It's just one of those things that I'm a little bit of a control freak, and so networking is great for me because I like to make things go where I want them to go, and then they're electronics and they do whatever I ask them to do, so I don't have to have any flack.
Of course they do.
Yes.
Tell me about last Saturday.
Yeah, that was a problem. That was an issue we had, wasn't it? And actually, everybody.
But that's just life.
If you are in the chat section, let us know if the chat is working correctly. We're still using that new software and still trying to figure out 100% to make sure that it's working the way that it's supposed to. So let us know if it's working correctly by sending us a chat.
And let us know if it's not.
Yeah, and let us know directly here. You can call us or send us an email.
Well, not during the broadcast.
Well,
ooh, that reminds me. Thank you.
You're not on mute, see? Okay, so
thank you.
This is a topic that's come up a few times, and you can see I've actually been kind of playing around with some Spyclops stuff back here. We're also working on some extra videos on to upload to YouTube to help you guys out when needing to do like factory resets and things like that. Make your life a little bit easier. That's where those come from.
Well, let's be honest. It's a fair amount of the tech calls.
But it is a fair amount of the tech calls of where should I put the camera or how do I get connected to an IP camera? That's
and
a big thing.
Actually, because I don't do the Spyclops support, he does.
Yeah.
Him and Lewis and Stuart do all the Spyclops. I get the easy job HDMI.
Mm-hmm.
And I do walk through while they're talking, and a lot of it is, okay, break out your IP sniffer or your network search tool, and I don't have one of those.
Well, and honestly, that's not even a bad thing. Break out your laptop. Break out your laptop, or for that matter, break out your cell phone, because there's a lot of stuff on your cell phone that you can use.
And fortunately, I have the vast majority on my iPad as well. So.
Yeah.
On the jobs you and I have worked together, I can actually do a search when you say, Brent, check for this.
Right. We can see it. Thank you so much. All right. So we've got somebody in the chat. So thank you very much. Okay. So
let's start with the basics.
Right.
I'm an integrator.
Mm-hmm.
And I have bought one of the Spyclops systems. A little bit of shilling there.
It's a little bit of a lofty claim also, you being an integrator. Careful.
Oh, it's all connected. We're still connected, so I'm not going to pick that one up.
No.
So I have my NVR in my rack.
Yes.
Standing there behind you.
Yes.
And there is one in that rack behind you.
I believe there is.
And I went out and I've installed all my cameras.
Yes.
Now, I'm a lazy guy, so I didn't do my wiring, but I am doing my terminations.
Sure.
So I'm plugging everything in. Now, here's the question. Do I go ahead and just plug everything in ad hoc and then hunt down the cameras, or do I plug them in one at a time and start with my networking assignments there?
So the beauty of Spyclops is it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because truthfully, you can actually, with the Spyclops camera systems themselves, and again, we're speaking from that side because, of course, that's our product line.
And our tech support.
So, and our tech support. So It may be different for other manufacturers, so keep an eye on that. But I am going to cover something that can apply for every single camera system out there that will help you in the long run. Now, with Spyclops Pro, the really great thing is that if you're using an NVR with the PoE ports built into it, they're plug and play, which means that it does not matter. You plug them in, they're going to show up on the screen.
So as soon as you plug it in, it does the auto assignment, it gives it the IP address,
everything's right there.
And you move on.
Yep, exactly. You don't have to think about anything else.
I'm going to assume that I'm not doing that. I'm actually going for a larger system, or I'm using an outboard PoE switch.
Sure. So you can still go ahead and plug everything in, and when the Spyclops Pro system does a scan on the network for additional cameras, it will find all of those cameras, even though they all share the same IP address.
Okay.
Because from the factory, when you plug all the cameras in, they have the same IP address. You actually don't want DHCP when it comes to surveillance cameras, because the camera can change its address, which now the NVR...
Which is not good, because if you've got if you're doing a specific IP search off-site, it's not there.
Well, and it's not even, it's actually even closer than that at the NVR, because the NVR is told where to look for the camera feed, and so it's looking for a specific address, and if it goes to that address and nothing's there, there's no picture.
Okay,
it doesn't
so
know to
back
do
to
it.
my question. I have my NVR,
Right.
and I'm not using the internal switch. I'm using an external switch.
Sure.
I've plugged my NVR into the switch. I've mounted all my cameras, plugged them in, and now they're all connected to the switch. They're all live.
Right.
But they're all showing the same IP address, so I'm going to have to assume they all have a different MAC address.
Yeah, so they all have a different MAC address, and that's fine. And for our system, we don't really use the MAC address for addressing or finding or anything else like that. You can. For instance, if you go to the camera, in many cases, you'll be able to find out the MAC address through our search tool, and you'll be able to see that. But there's also, for the most part, we're just going to go ahead and give those cameras a range, which kind of brings me to what I want to talk about for networking in general. Will you give me a top-down shot? See if you do it right. Haha, there you go, perfect.
You know,
Okay.
the buttons are a lot smaller on this full control app than they are on the half control app.
Trying to get used to it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have here is our whiteboard, and I'm going to draw just really straightforward. We need to kind of define the different types of networks. So, and pardon me, the different networks that you'll be dealing with on a daily basis. And I'm going to hit this button here really quick because we're getting kind of dark. All right, we'll try that. Okay. So when we have the network, you have a couple things. You've got your WAN network and you have your LAN network, right? Now the WAN, we can view this as the cloud, right? This is just up there in the cloud. It's doing its own thing. That's where the internet is. That's the wide area network. So that's everything outside
I thought it was
of our
how
house.
you feel when you're tired.
And you're WANing. The LAN, of course, is everything local to that location. Now, there's different things. Of course, you've got VLANs. You've also got VPNs, which kind of extend your VLAN to different LANs and different networks and whatnot and whatever else. But we're not getting that deep into this today. So when you have your LAN, this is where all of your devices on your network are located. We're going to assume this is a very flat network. So we're going to have something pretty straightforward, right? We're going to do 192.168.0.x because we don't know what the last octet is for this system. By the way, that's the correct phrase for that, octet. Each one of these, so 192.168.0, and then the last one, those are octets. So the first octet, second, third, and fourth octet. So the last octet, the fourth octet, is where we're really focusing on for the address of the camera. Everything before that tells us the subnet information for that. So this network is based on this type of IP address subnet, or first three octets. So we need to make sure that our cameras wind up there. Now, out of the box, our cameras are set up at a 192.168.1.168 address out of the box. So we need to actually take that and change it to whatever it's going to work for on the network. So the first step of doing that is finding out what the network is. So what I like to do, of course, is on a Windows-based PC. You can do it on a Mac or a Linux computer as well, but open up Command or Terminal if you're on a Mac or a Linux machine. So just type in CMD inside of your search tool, and that'll bring up the command line. Or you can type in Terminal in a Mac to bring up the terminal as well. So the command to find out what that network is really straightforward, right? If you're on a Windows machine, go here and do this because I think we're done explaining
And
that.
let's be honest, if you're doing any programming, you're probably on a Windows machine.
Correct. So in the command line, hopefully y'all can read that there. In the command line for Windows, it's very straightforward. It is IP config. Pretty straightforward. That's it. Type that in and hit enter. That's going to spit out a bunch of stuff. And what you're looking for specifically is the IPv4 address for whatever your connection is. So if you're on Wi-Fi, you're going to look for something like WLAN. If you're on a hardwired connection, I forget exactly what it's called, but you're going to look for basically whatever the structure is. So it could be a 192.168 structure, .x.x, or it could be a 10 structure, a 10.1.10, or 10.0.0. It could be any number of things, but essentially we're looking for just a few of these. Actually, we did an entire episode on this, by the way.
Which was an awesome episode.
If you go back through into the archives of our show, you should find
8 months to a year ago.
8 months to a year ago, I believe that was right. We did an episode on networking, and we talked specifically about the different types of IP addresses that are out there. Go back and watch that video because we get into more details as to why we use 192.168 or why we use 10.1.10 or 10.0.0. But really good episode on that. Go check that out. So anyways, doing this IP config is going to help us find out which address we're working on. Now, the next thing that we need to find out is what area of the network is open and available to use. Now, Brent.
Does this require a response from me?
It does, just a little
we're in
bit.
trouble.
So when you're playing like a certain game where you're trying to figure out something that, for instance, you've already learned, you don't know where something is, but you know where it's not.
We're playing Marco Polo?
Sure, something like that, right? You're just playing some kind of what's the word I'm looking for?
You're trying to find an answer by process of elimination.
Yes, that's essentially what you're trying to do. So we don't know exactly, well, we do know exactly where certain things are, but let's say, for instance, you're setting up a camera system on a network that you don't own, right? You don't have access to the entire configuration of it.
Have not seen it. You've just walked on the job site. You don't have the documentation.
Right. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to go ahead and open up some kind of scanning tool that you use to scan the IP network. Now,
Which one do you recommend?
I recommend the advanced IP scanner. Pretty straightforward.
Is this a free tool?
This is free. Go online, just Google that. Google advanced IP scanner. In fact, as you start typing advanced, it'll be one of the first things that shows up.
Obviously, a lot of people use it.
Yep, exactly. Download that piece of software. What it's going to allow you to do is go in and scan that network. Now, read the instructions and whatnot. This is not a Metra program. I'm going to put that out there right now. We do not own that program. This is someone else's, so I cannot guarantee its use.
Do you get a kickback from this program?
I do not. Well, it's free. I don't think they even get a kickback on it. So at that point, but go download that tool. Now, what that tool is going to do, when you run it, it's going to spit out a bunch of different devices that are on the network. So you're going to see something at 192.168.0.1. Guess what? That's the router, right? That's pretty straightforward. Most routers are going to be at that address. They're going to be at .0.1, or they're going to be at .1 at the very least, is what you're looking for. Some of them, AT&T, I think even Verizon may have a couple of them. They put them all the way down at the other end, .0.254. For some weird reason, they'll put them down there. So, but what you may see is that, okay, we've got the 0.1 address, but the next address in line is actually something like 192.168.0.115, right? And that's going to come back as some like random MAC address and random
maybe a printer
creator or something like that or whatever. But when that comes back as that, and then there's a bunch of other stuff that's like, here's 117, here's 125, here's 136, whatever, right? It keeps going down from there. Now, here's the thing. That tells us by our powers of deduction, Brent, do you know what a DHCP pool is?
Well, since you're obviously playing this out, I'm going to say no.
Okay. So
Because you have an answer, don't you?
Within networking, again, we did cover this in another episode, but I'm just going to kind of glance over it just a little bit. I'm going to go back and find that episode and put it in the description below. But in that episode, we talked specifically about DHCP pool. So a DHCP pool is essentially a pool of IP addresses that the router is going to hand out to different devices.
Semi-reserved, not a fully reserved, but this is the area we want to stick stuff.
So this is the area that we want to stick stuff. So when a device gets connected to the network, so let's say your cell phone or a laptop gets connected to the Wi-Fi, it's going to ask the router or the DHCP server, which in most cases is the router, I need an IP address, is essentially what it's doing. And the router is going to respond, okay, great, use this address. And both are going to log that information, and now it's broadcasting on the network at that address. So your laptop may say, okay, or the router says, okay, Mr. Laptop, you are at 117, right? Now your phone is at 125, or something like that. So the router is handing out different addresses from the DHCP pool. Now, Brent, where do we not want to put our cameras? Or back up, where do we not want to put any static device?
We want to try to avoid the DHCP pool, because we want to be in an area where they're not going to actually drop something on top of us.
Right. So
nobody wants a piano on the head.
let's say, for instance, we're going to take this address here. So this is 192.168.0.136. So 192.168.0.136, right? Now, if we put our camera at .136, right, then now something happens. The power goes out, something's unplugged or whatever else. Everything gets plugged back in and turned on. Now, my Xbox is normally down here at 250, right?
Normally.
Well, it's not even normally. It's just, let's just say that's where mine normally sits because that's where my router put it. Now, when the power goes out and comes back on, it may be time for this Xbox to get a new IP address anyway. There's actually leases is what it's called. So what's going to happen then is that as the router is then handing out new addresses, let's say that our IP camera, which is at this 136 address, takes just a little bit longer time for it to reboot, right? So that means that there's a chance that during that reboot time that the Xbox could be given that address after the reboot. Which means now, when it comes back online, the Xbox is now at 136. But the IP camera that I have, I've actually put in there, hey, IP camera, this is your static IP address, it's 136. So now, after the Xbox has already been given this address after the reboot, now the IP camera comes online and says, I'm at 192.168.0.136.
And the router does not reassign the Xbox.
No, it does not, because it's not that smart. Now, there are some systems out there, but we're talking thousands upon thousands of dollars smart.
Now, you and I have dealt with this problem.
Yes, we have. There you go. So actually, Randall's saying the same thing there on YouTube. He's saying, and the DHCP server leases this IP address to a device for a fixed period of time. As long as it's active, it can keep it. That's true. And that's where the problem comes in. So if the Xbox is leased at 250, but then it goes offline or whatever else, then whenever power comes back online, the Xbox turns on automatically for some reason. Whatever it is, now all of a sudden it could be sitting at an IP address that our IP camera was actually using to begin with. So now we've got a pretty big problem because the IP camera is now saying, no, I am Spartacus. Did you get that reference?
I got the reference, but I'm ignoring you.
Did I use it correctly at least?
You did, but I'm ignoring you.
Okay. It's all those years. It's all these years of you saying references and me not getting them is what this is, right?
Well, I guess the fact that you're willing to throw one out there does impress me.
Are you proud of me at that point at least?
Particularly that one.
Okay, good. All right, good.
Now, are you talking the original Spartacus?
I haven't seen either of them, so it doesn't even matter.
You know, if they could see my face on camera now.
Yes, I know. So with this here, now the Xbox is sitting at 136, and the camera is saying, no, I'm at 136. So now the problem is that the router doesn't care at this point.
Are you the evil Kirk or the good Kirk?
I have a mustache.
You're the evil Kirk.
I'm the evil Kirk. So it's the router saying, I don't care. I've already given out that IP address to this device, so it's going to sit there at 136. It's not going to try to renegotiate for it. That causes a big problem because now the Xbox is stepping on the IP camera, which now that means that when the NVR comes back online and is looking for that IP camera, nothing's there, or it'll be intermittent. You may have a flash of a picture and then the picture goes away. Because the Xbox may be talking part of the time, and then when it's not talking, now the camera's talking. And so then you have just basically an overall issue.
Pretty much anybody that does control systems has run into this issue.
100%. So that's what a DHCP pool is essentially where that comes into place. So
I'm going to ask this, do you recommend reserving areas?
I do, and actually we talked about that in that last episode, in that episode about that, because there's, and actually I do both. In many cases, I will also reserve on the device itself, especially if it's like a mission critical device like surveillance systems, I will assign it and go in and reserve.
So nothing else gets stuck in that arena?
No, yeah, there's no chance for it. Now, what I will actually do also in that is I change my DHCP pool. In fact, and in the description of this video and the video that we talked about this before, there will be a link to a worksheet that has a map of different IP addresses and different VLANs and whatever else. So go on there, download that worksheet, because it has all of this laid out, and you can modify it, do whatever you need to. It's just an Excel file. You can use it inside of Google Docs or Excel or whatever else you want to use.
And we do recommend that companies create a policy for this.
Yeah, make it
internally
standard.
So that all jobs basically use the same reservations and the same statics.
Yep.
Your front door camera should always be this IP on all your jobs. So hey, that's the front door camera.
Right. So once you've got that set, now that we understand why we don't want to set ourselves inside of a DHCP range, now where do we put it? Well, again, like Brent was just saying there, you really should have some kind of agreed upon or company policy or whatever it is for where to put it. Now, here at Metra, if you call in for tech support, a lot of times we're going to say, let's put the camera at 192.168.0.80, right?
In a lot of cases, above most devices.
It puts you above most DHCP ranges that start at the low end, but it also usually puts you before DHCP ranges on the high end. So that kind of puts you into that position. So 80 is a good starting point. I actually, again, because I'm a little weird when it comes to certain things, I put my NVR and DVR. Nah, I know. I don't want to quantify it at the moment. I put my router, or not router, pardon me, I put my NVR or DVR at 80, and I put the first camera at 81, because that's the first camera.
Really? So the numbers just line up with the ports?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, it makes, gotta be careful because it makes too much sense, right?
I could turn you into a Crestron programmer.
Yeah, I know.
I could.
Yeah.
That philosophy.
Maybe we'll have a series where I get Crestron training.
Because that philosophy right there, I could turn you into a Crestron programmer.
Yeah, right? At least I got the right numbers, right? Yeah, so Randall, you're saying the right things there. A device usually does keep the DHCP, but again, we're talking mission critical. Well, and even on power outages, a lot of times it does come back with the same address, even if the leasing period is up. Usually most routers today, even consumer grade routers, will put stuff back where they were before, because why change if it doesn't need to? And in that case, you usually don't run into a problem. But again, these are mission critical things like surveillance and security,
really,
where it's recommended.
Honestly, with our homeowners nowadays, I consider the Roku's mission critical, because we get that phone call before we get the surveillances down.
Right, but again, with Roku's and whatnot, we're setting reservations for them.
Yes,
so we don't have to worry too much about it. So now that we know, okay, let's stay out of the DHCP pool, where do we put it? We put it at 80 and 81. I think that's a really good spot to go ahead or start at 81 for the first camera, put the NVR at 80. Technically, you don't have to put the NVR, at least with our Spyclops cameras, or our Spyclops NVRs and Spyclops Pro, you don't have to put them at a specific static IP address. You can actually put them at a DHCP address, and it won't matter. But because, again, I'm a little bit of a control freak when it comes to these things, I go ahead and put my NVR at that address. It just seems to work out better, right?
And it's a good policy.
Yeah. So then, of course, camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4, we're just going down in lines from there. We're just doing 81, 82, 83, and 84.
And the nice thing is, unlike modulated channels, we had to skip 3 or 4 between them because of filter quality. You can put them right on top of each other and there's no issues.
Right, because we're doing, well, it's digital. I know.
Don't
I
say
said
that.
it. I said it.
It's digital's digital. It either works or it doesn't work. I'm
Okay.
going to hit you. I'm going to hit you.
So here's the other thing that we can do with this is now we can say, okay, this is good practice for cameras, but this is also really good practice for any other type of networking that you're working on. If what I like to do in my systems, and
But wait.
you got a question?
But wait. If you have IP devices like DirecTV satellite receivers or Dish Network, and you have them as 1, 2, 3, 4, guess what you should do?
Again, pick out something like this.
Yes.
Put it at 21, 22, 23, and 24.
Yep.
Right?
That way you got it consistent. It's easy to check the map. You know what's going on. The stuff's not spread all over the place.
Yeah, you know where the stuff is based on the fact that you know which number it's at. And actually, again, if you go and download that network map that we made up for it, it actually is in there that way. I break it down to where I have, here's all of your networking gear. So the router is at dot 0.1. The next piece in line, then just on down from there. And the way that I like to do is based on two things, based on location in the signal path. So we have the router first because it's in that first position. The next thing in line would be my point 2. So in a lot of cases, it's a primary switch of some kind. And if it's a smart switch and you can configure it in some way, I like to go ahead and put it at that position to where I can get into it if I need to, right? From there, I put in like if it was Luxel or another brand of wireless systems, they have a wireless controller. I like to put that as my next one in line, right? Then from there, then I go out physically on a physical map of, okay, here's where my next access point is, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one.
Touch panels, sources, etc.
Right, and there's even a breakdown of, here's all of our automation devices that go in this chunk, and I think it starts at like 31 or something like that for those. And here's all the power devices, and here's all the surveillance devices. And then last, I actually change out my DHCP because at that point, the DHCP pool does not need to be 150 IP addresses. You can actually decrease that from 150 from 100 through 255 or 254. You can now decrease that and say, okay, all of the addresses between 200 and 250 are now DHCP pool reserved, right? Because 50 devices is a little bit more realistic for the number of devices that are actually going to be connected to the network on DHCP.
And a semi-mobile
Right.
basis.
Now, I'm also going to say, let's put printers on a static IP address. Because we all know how difficult printers are. Brent, how many times have you gotten a call about a printer? And I'm not just saying that.
No,
I'm not just saying that you have to change out
the paper and the cartridges.
Yeah.
Printers for something that's such an everyday device are such a pain in the rear. And I've tried every brand, so it's not like Epson's better than Seiko or Hewlett Packard or what. They're all Canon. They're all pain in the butt.
Well, and here's the thing. Also, printers. We're finally getting to the point now where printers aren't that prevalent. You don't need to print off things, but that's the problem because you don't know when they stop working, and to fix them right away. And you don't have to use them every day, so you don't know the ins and outs of them very easy.
Right.
And so nowadays
it's
just
offline.
It's been 7 months since I printed something, and now I got to print something again, and I've completely forgotten, whatever configurations or whatever else is.
That's
Come on
one of the
back
things
up,
I'm
right?
doing in LA next week.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just to make sure.
Yep. Let's see. We'll turn this off. Turn this back on. We'll cut back over here. Come on back up. Right?
Can I join you?
Yeah, please. Okay, so
As far as you guys know, I was standing off on the side, getting exercise. I wasn't sitting down with my feet propped up.
sure, of course.
That's.
Yeah,
I
of
don't want
course.
to think I'm lazy.
Anyways, so once you've done this, once you understand the layout of the network, and that's the important part, is there anything else that I'm forgetting to help explain for networking? Do you feel like if you were
the networking comes across as being much tougher than it is.
yeah.
We joke about it.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you just prior to going to the job site, did I mention prior to going to the job site?
Brent, is that before or after you go to the job site?
Before.
While you're there?
No.
Oh, okay.
Lay out your plan. Have a plan in advance, and seriously, it should be a company-wide policy.
Yeah. I also have a miscellaneous section on that map. You should put the stuff that you didn't plan for and you don't have room for somewhere else, throw it in the miscellaneous section. Just make a note somewhere that says this is where it's at.
There's going to be weird things that pop up, and don't forget when you were setting these things up, all your Alexa devices, all your Tuya devices, all these things fall under the Wi-Fi and the network.
So there's also another thing when it comes to this. When you are, let me hit the right button here. when you go into the network, and this is, again, a very flat network that we're describing here. Let's say, for instance, you don't have a flat network. Let's say you've got a couple of VLANs set up as well. No, pardon me, let me back up. With what we're designing here is a flat network. Flat networks are super easy because all you're doing is just saying it's one floor, right? It's one floor of a house. We're just basically saying, okay,
this is your bedroom, this is your bedroom, this is your room.
You're over there, you're over there, you're over there. Now, with a VLAN, the only thing that you have to consider with the VLAN is that now it's a second floor. We have two floors going on the same footprint, right? That's a pretty good analogy. I'm pretty proud of that analogy, actually. With VLANs, the thing is that
happy with that?
I am going to be, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I am. I'm going to go home and tell my kids about that and how good of a description that was.
Their life is sad, isn't it?
When it comes to when Dad's explaining work.
Yeah.
So when you are looking at a VLAN, it's the same thing. You're still saying you're over there, you're over there, you're over there, and you're over there, but now you're just on the second floor. You're on a second VLAN for that system. Now, normally that means that you change the subnet a little bit. So instead of 192.168.0, you're going to say that it's a 192.168.1 or .7 or whatever. It's entirely up to you and your network structure.
But again, standardized for the company.
Yes. Now, the routing between the VLANs is like your flight of stairs. You usually have one point that you go to get up and down between the two different floors. It's the same idea with VLAN, and you still have to go through a router, which is acting as your flight of stairs to route the different communications between that. So, dang, that's a really good analogy.
Now, do you prefer to have your surveillance on a separate VLAN from the rest of the system?
It depends. For me, it's the size and complexity of the system. So if we are doing just a very basic, I go into someone's house and I am installing just a 4-camera system, and I have a PoE switch that's powering those 4 cameras and a separate NVR, there's not enough traffic to warrant a separate VLAN. Especially because usually in a system like that, they don't have automation. They may be streaming Netflix and Hulu and Spotify and whatever else, but they're not usually doing a bunch of inter-network traffic, right? So there's not a lot of stuff that's taking up and eating up that bandwidth. Now, when we get into the much larger systems where an automation system is required, where I'm running out of IP addresses in a certain section that I want to set aside for it, where I've filled out that map sheet almost entirely and I have just a few spots open, I've even eaten away at my DHCP range, yeah, a system like that.
I like to VLAN all the Alexa to you, those kind of devices.
Oh yeah, put that on the guest network.
Because first off, there's a ton of traffic in those devices that you don't realize how much traffic, because they're constantly checking with each other.
Yes.
So there's a lot of traffic there, and taking that off your security, off of your, I don't like to have them on the same as the Roku, for example.
Right.
Because again, if you got multiple streaming platforms in the house, that's a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
And you throw all the Alexas and the 2U switches and whatever else you got on there, I like to VLAN those out separately. And I give that credit to you in the video that you did.
Yeah, and again, going back to that video
on that one.
Well, and going back to that video, the thing is that when you look at VLANing something, you're not necessarily looking at just segmenting it out for the purpose of segmenting it out.
Or security.
Or security. What you're really doing with a VLAN is you're actually speeding up the network, because the processor inside of these routers and these other devices on a network, here's what's happening. You're 192.168.1.7, right?
Thank you.
And I'm 192.168.1.24, okay? Here's the thing. I am constantly saying, I'm Adam at 192.168.1.24. It just constantly. It's constantly happening.
That explains why we're constantly being annoyed by you yelling at the office.
Yeah, of course. So the thing is that's always happening. Which the thing is, though, is that you are always hearing that happen.
Everything on the network's hearing everything on the network.
Right. Now, the thing is, though, is that what I've said, I'm Adam at 192, that it takes this long to say it, right? So the thing is when I've said it now and it's taken this long to say it, you've had to listen to me saying that entire time. Whether or not you wanted to or not, you had to stop and listen to it. Now, the thing with the VLAN essentially is that instead of me saying that, I'm saying 1, 1, 1, or whatever, right? It's a lot more complicated
I can realize I don't need to listen to you.
You don't need to listen to anything else beyond 1, right? So you can say, because you're on VLAN 2, or however else that's going to play out. Now, because you hear 1 instead of 2, you ignore the rest of that information, right? Everything else after that one, you don't care about because it's not meant for you.
So I don't have to listen to it. I don't have to process it. I'm not the least bit worried about you.
Right, exactly.
Like sticking you in your own damn office.
So that speeds up your ability to process everything else that you need to process. That's why it's good for you to VLAN different types of systems separate from each other, especially a surveillance system. If you're getting beyond 16 cameras on an IP network.
See, I would count, honestly, in my book, anything past 4 becomes a more, I would VLAN anything past 4.
Yeah, sure.
4 is fairly basic, residentially easy to support on pretty much any network.
Yeah.
You get past that, particularly as we get into 4K cameras, there's a fair amount of data passing around. You throw in some Rokus on the job site, and maybe they add a Ring camera.
So
there's a lot happening there.
Now here's the thing. Take this as an example. Here on this network right now that we're using to broadcast right now, pardon me, what we're broadcasting right now is on the same network that we use for our cameras, our surveillance cameras that we have here in the lab. We have probably upwards of close to 64, even greater than that number of cameras.
There's a lot of cameras live all the time.
We also have
plus multiple NVRs.
Correct.
Plus multiple PCs.
And those multiple NVRs are looking at the same cameras at the same time, which is just additional traffic for that one camera.
It's not always a good idea.
No, you really shouldn't. You really should not have multiple NVRs looking at the same camera. But the thing is that's a lot of traffic, and yet we're still able to broadcast, right? So even with all of that traffic that's happening, we're doing okay. But the thing is that you don't want to do that in mission critical scenarios, which we should probably VLAN our stuff separate from our camera systems, because this should be mission. Now that I'm talking about it and saying it out loud, we probably should. Do as I say, not as I do. I never say that to my kids. All that to say,
they don't listen to you much, do they? No.
No. Thankfully, no. They listen to mom more than listen to dad. Okay, so with that said, what happens when we have a? Okay, let's work on a couple scenarios, right? So we have just a very basic system. It's a cabin in the woods. We don't even have
I saw that movie.
A network of some kind, right? Cabin in the woods. We don't even have a local network of any kind. There's no internet service. There's no Wi-Fi. There's no 5G, 4G, 3G. There's nothing, right? We're way out there. But you want to record
So we're in
some
northern
cameras.
New York.
Yeah, sure.
We're upstate New York.
Yeah, northwest New York. Yeah, we're up there in the middle of nowhere. But we still want to have some cameras in there because when we do finally visit the campsite, we like to go back and review and see did the big black bear show up on the front porch or not. In that scenario, what do we do?
You're going to have to put in a switch. You're going to have to put in cameras. You're going to have to put in a power supply. You're going to have to put in UPS.
Honestly, for myself, no, I think I'm just going to put it in a coax system. I'm just going to put it in an analog system.
Just put an analog system.
I'm just going to put it. I put that in there as a curveball for you. Yeah,
it's a great idea, and I'll tell you why. First off, if you do it as an SDI or a CV or HDCV
or AHD,
you're going to get up to 4K now. And there's not going to be any network glitches.
Nope.
You put a UPS on it, and there's not going to be any downtime because of network problems.
Nope.
And it's an easier termination for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've seen your work.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's in a super small remote location like that. Yeah, just put an analog system in there. Now, okay,
analog is a misnomer because it's still high definition.
It's still HD. It's still a digital connection.
And you're pretty much limited to 16 or less cameras.
Yes. Now, beyond that though, if you have a system where it's super basic and you just need 4 cameras, yeah, we actually even sell kits where it's just. Do we have a 4-camera kit? I think we do have a 4-camera kit. Yeah, we have a 4 and an 8-channel kit that on those kits, you just plug them in and they work. It's basically like an analog system.
And it comes with the cables. You don't even have to terminate.
Yeah. Now, I will say that everything that we've talked about so far, those systems that have the PoE ports in the back of the NVR, those are a separate VLAN. So the system automatically is separating out that connection
for you
for that system.
So it is just looking internally, and it's WAN port going out to the rest of the network.
Correct.
talks to the rest of the network on its normal address.
Yeah, correct.
Everything inside of the security, the video surveillance world, is automatically VLANed. You don't have to do a thing. There's no buttons, no settings. You just plug it in and turn it on.
Yep, that's right. So as we get into more advanced systems, now we have to worry about, well, what's going on in the network? Because that other system, it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about how the network is laid out. You don't have to worry about anything because the NVR is VLANing that system aside anyways, and the NVR can do DHCP because we're using the cloud service to access it.
Right.
So very little network knowledge has to come into play in that instance.
And it's a great starting position.
It is. Now, as soon as you get into something where you're adding additional cameras to that, because again, our NVRs, you can expand.
Up to 16.
You can, 9. So when you have that, when you expand out beyond that, let's say we're now using a PoE switch of some kind and we're adding additional cameras, now we have to worry about where we put those cameras. So as soon as we do that, that's when we have to consider where to put those cameras on the network, because we can't do DHCP because those cameras may change. You can do DHCP reservation, but in many cases, it's going to cause problems somewhere along the line with when it comes to surveillance. Go ahead and just give it a static IP address. But that's where you really kind of start to consider where you're putting it. Now, the worst part is that the DHCP pool, there are many ISP routers, the provided router that they send to you, that the entire range of IP addresses are used for the DHCP pool.
Well, why would they not want to give you everything? Because they're trying to fit as many jobs as possible with as few tech calls. And the assumption is you're going to plug in a couple of smart TVs, a few mobile devices,
and that's it.
And some Alexas.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's their assumption.
Well, and their assumption is that you are not savvy enough to do static IP address of some kind.
Well,
why would you need to?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they're not wrong for most of their clientele.
Right. Eero does that. Do they do that? They do the thing where it's like the entire pool of addresses?
I have not worked on Eero.
That's the experts are saying that Eero does that. So the better question is, on Eero, can you change that? Can you actually set it down to a set pool, or where you have other addresses that are outside of that? Verizon is typically 100 to 200. So yeah, that's better. That's better. It's better. And Verizon, I think you can actually modify that. You can actually change where the DHCP pool is for Verizon as well, if I remember correctly. The experts say that no, on the Eero, you can't actually change that. Oh, that's frustrating.
So everything, yes.
Yeah, that's frustrating. Thanks, Leo. Good to see you in the chat. And of course, the experts, it's good to see you in the chat as well. So now that we have the addresses figured out, that's the main thing. We just have to figure out, where do we put the device on the network? That's the biggest thing. And because in most cases, if you're pardon me for putting it this way, if you're asking the question of how do I set this up, you're not doing a VLAN system.
Well, my next question was going to be legitimately.
Yeah.
I have purchased a non-kit.
Yeah.
So I have an NVR. I have a camera.
Yep.
I might have two cameras.
Sure.
Because I'm just that kind of guy.
Sure.
So I've got two cameras. They both have the same IP address out of the box. Because you told me they did.
Yep.
So how do I assign the IP addresses to the two different cameras?
So luckily, if you're using our system, if you're using our SpyClops Pro NVR, it can find both of those cameras, and you can just simply put a check mark next to each camera, and you give it a starting IP address. And what I mean by that is that the system will give, whichever first camera you checked, that's the starting one. So when you say I want it at 192.168.1.81, it's going to start at 81, which means the first camera is 81, the second camera is 82.
And each one you check after that,
it just keeps right on
will
going through.
automatically fill it in for you.
Right. And that's our system. That's also available on our search tool that we have on our website. If you go to one of our cameras in the download section of the files section, there's IP search tool. You'll be able to download it there, and that same tool does that same function. It'll find all the cameras on the network, even if they're on a different subnet somewhere else.
Which does happen.
Does happen. And it'll give those, you can check mark those cameras, set the starting IP address and all the other information for it.
That's awesome.
And it just pushes through and does all of them. Now, if you are doing this with a non-SpyClops Pro camera system, we'll walk through that. They may have a tool like that. That's entirely up to them. I can't speak to whether or not they do. However, what you would need to do in that case is that if all the cameras have the same IP address, you would need to start with one camera. Plug one camera in, find that camera,
Find
set the address,
menu up, set that address, and then plug the next one in.
And then, exactly. Just keep right on going, one by one by one. Now, that's used to be pretty standard. That used to be what pretty much everyone was doing until they found ways to do search tools and whatever else. So you could do it that way, and that will work with every single IP camera manufacturer out there. That same process will work with everyone, including ours. If you run into a situation where you don't have access to the internet and you have a brand new laptop and you haven't downloaded the new search tool, you can still go through,
one at a time,
plug it in one at a time, log into it, set the IP address, move on to the next one. Log into it, set the IP address.
Takes you a little longer, but it's still done correctly.
It's still functioning. Yeah, you can still make it work that way. I do highly recommend downloading those other pieces of software here and there to make sure that you have them on there. It's just like the tools in your toolbox or your tool bag. Those are things that should be on your computer ready to go. In fact, I'll even take it a step further. Download the installation files, put them on a zip thumb drive or a zip drive. Put it on a thumb drive of some kind and have that in your tool bag. Have it there and ready to go so that it has all those tools on that thumb drive ready to go. In fact, I'll take it even a step further. Download the firmware updates for the different NVRs and cameras and put them on that thumb drive. Because as a new device comes in, you can go ahead and do the update and you're good to go.
Now, and I'm not a big auto update guy.
Sure.
So I would, if you see an update, you have any questions, call us about it. Say, hey, you guys see any issues with update, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And Adam, Stuart, and Lewis would be honest with you.
Yep.
Because we don't like taking the calls.
No. So that's basically it. I think we're at the end of our episode today. That's the basics of making sure that you've configured your network correctly. Configure your network for your surveillance system. Configure your network for any kind of static IP address you have going on. When you're doing, what's a zip drive? Oh, man. I know. I know. If you're doing a larger system anyways, you're going to need to do static IP addresses of some kind. Control Forward, Crestron, Savant, even URC and RTI have network connected equipment
devices now.
And they can control things over that network. In a lot of cases, those devices need to be on a static IP address. I know Control 4 has SDDP and it's supposed to be able to find that device somewhere on the network. Tell me how many times that's failed, or ask me how many times that's failed. Actually, better yet, tell me. Tell me in the comment section how many times that has failed you. So that's really what this comes down to. Being able to set up your network in a way that works around what the network is when you get there. If, for instance, you don't have ownership of the network, or if you do have ownership of the network, using that map tool to really map out what's going on. In fact, that network map, if you don't own the network, that's still helpful because you can go ahead and dictate where that DHCP pool is when you do that search. Again, using our powers of deduction.
Where is it not?
Where is it not? Because we can say, okay, we've got a bunch of devices plugged in or connected to the Wi-Fi, and they all show up between 100 and 200. Guess what? That's probably our DHCP pool, right? Even if I don't log into that system to find out exactly what it is, I have a pretty good idea that it's not anything outside of that.
You just got to start looking closely.
Just call me Sherlock.
Ba-lump-bump.
So I think that kind of does it for us today. I think that kind of covers everything else. So now you are, leave us a comment down below. Like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell notification to let us know whenever we do go live, which of course is every Wednesday and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Next week, Brent.
I'm in Los Angeles.
You are in Los Angeles.
By the way, anybody's out in Los Angeles, drop me a call, see if we can do dinner one night. Lunch is pretty much not going to happen, but dinner could.
Sure.
I'm there from the 5th to the 15th.
Next week, I am going to be doing an episode, I believe, again, on a surveillance topic.
Yes. Now, my suggestion, we discussed it earlier, I would discuss
the differences between an NVR
and DVRs.
DVRs, yeah.
And the difference between a kit system and a roll your own system.
Sure.
Because they all have their applications.
So, never mind, I'm not going to make a joke. We're live on air. I can't make certain jokes.
You going to make something reference to roll your own?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I'll let you make a joke about it, not me.
No, it's just that's the unofficial official term.
Sure.
Roll your own.
Sure. Okay, so everyone.
A la carte?
A la carte. There you go. So everyone, thank you so much for checking out the video today. If you have any questions going further, leave it down in the comment section below. Thank you again so very much for being there for that. You can, of course, if you have any questions, you can reach us at our direct lines here, 386-202-6132 or
6137.
There you go. You can also email us at adam.rogers@metraav.com
or brent.mccall@metraav.com.
That's right. So come back this Friday where we're going to be talking about, I believe we're talking about our 8 megapixel camera.
Ooh, that one actually excites me because the video quality on that thing is amazing.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. Come back next week where we'll be talking about another SpyClops or surveillance topic, the difference between NVRs and DVRs. I think that's a really good topic. I think we will use that one. But come back next week where we'll talk about that.
Well, no, it won't be we.
Or I.
It'll be you.
Sure. I might have you as a talking head. Somewhere in there, anyways. We'll figure it out.
Last time I was sitting on the patio in LA.
Yeah, we'll
enjoying the weather.
Oh, yeah.
Of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And you weren't. Oh,
no,
wait. You were at the pool.
I was at my pool. It was
you
at
were
my
at
pool.
The pool.
I didn't have to go to LA to get to find a backyard in the pool. I was at my own.
Honestly, I was the jealous when your dog was having a good time.
It was great.
You were by the pool. The sun was shining.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lucky you.
Put that info in at the bottom so I don't have to scroll through the video to find it. You're talking about the phone number and email addresses? Sure. Yeah, we can put it in there. No worries. We'll make sure to put that in there as well. So with that, everybody, thank you so much. Come back next week for next week's episode. I think after that, we're talking about some HDMI stuff. No, come back the week after that where we are on site somewhere. We're actually
leaving the office?
We're leaving the office. We're going to be doing an episode at one of the local dealers here.
Is this the truck?
This is the truck episode. We're finally doing a truck episode.
About time.
About time. About finally.
About finally.
Finally
about time.
Finally about time.
About finally time.
So check us out for that one as well. That one's going to be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to that. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and
playtime.
Yeah, that one's going to be a good time.
Well, in that case, reboot early.
Reboot often.
Don't cut your wires too short.
Turn off CEC.
Call tech support. And don't drive angry. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
Have a great week.
We'll see y'all later. Thanks, everybody.